I really cared about being disliked, and I particularly cared about falling out with people. I really didn't like that one bit. I would dwell and dwell and dwell on it. And, particularly friends, for example, where you've been friends for a very long time, and there's that sense of sort of, well, I'm a f it's a failure if I walk away from this. And yet sometimes people just trigger each other, don't they? And you can't there's not a lot you can do about it. I mean, I suppose keeping being self-aware helps, but ultimately, I have actually recently sort of parted from quite a few people because it just wasn't really working. And in the past, I would have really struggled with that because everyone had to like me. And if they didn't like me, that was really, really hurt my sense of self, and it doesn't anymore.
Well, welcome to this episode of Exploring Emotional Overdraft. I'm very excited to have Heather Beach with me today. Not only is she an author, she is an expert in this space and she runs a business. So what we have today is someone who can not only tell us the experience they have with their own emotional overdraft, but also what you can do about it from a professional point of view, an expert point of view. So welcome, Heather. It's really great to have you on.
Thank you very much, Andy. It's lovely to be here.
And before we kick off, just so everyone knows a bit about you, can you tell us a little about your business and what you do?
Yes. So I run a business called Healthy Work Company, and I work with organizations on their well-being strategy and their well-being training needs. So I work very much from a stress risk assessment perspective. So I cover health and safety background. And so I try to get organizations to look at where stress occurs systemically in their organizations. And because, we know that obviously we can work individually and ultimately we can only control ourselves, can't we? But also we know that stress comes from the system, the culture. And so I try to work with organizations on that as well. So our main trainings are around manager conversations for wellbeing. So how managers should have those conversations, hence the book that I wrote last year called I'm a Boss, Not a Shrink. So that's the main thing that we do. We also work with organizations on their strategies, their stress risk assessment, and increasingly we're doing organizational sessions on overwhelm and burnout, which is obviously a topic that you know a great deal about, having written the book that you've written. Our main customers are people like ITV, Seadrill, Telegraph, Vertex Pharmaceuticals. We work with about 150 fairly big brands.
And do you work with smaller businesses as well, or do you do
No.
workshops that they can get involved in? You don't, just
We
mainly
do
in
free
major brands.
webinars that anyone can come to. So we've got one this week, for example, which is sort of a taster session for our overwhelm and burnout session, which anyone can come to. It doesn't matter what size they are, but effectively, because our courses are mostly in-house, we do like few open courses a year, which anyone could join at quite a low cost. But most of our courses are in-house. That means, and everything's tailored as well. So that means that really it's only really something that we work mainly with large organizations, not small ones.
Fantastic. But there are some free courses. And I've got to say right from the off, I'm a boss, not a shrink is such a good idea, because I think where this space is, as people start to become aware of emotional overdraft, if we're talking about that specifically, people start to explore that with themselves, and then they start to explore that with their teams and how it's impacting them. And then you can find yourself sliding from a sort of informal coach mentality into what feels like a shrink. And knowing where those boundaries are, I tend to say coaches look for, don't understand the reason why things happen. They look forward about what you're doing next, and shrinks look back at why. But that's an oversimplification. I absolutely understand that. I think it's really interesting to have you here, and we're going to explore this quite a bit today. I think is not only how you deal with your emotional overdraft running your business, but also how people might do that with their teams. So we've chatted in the past about this topic, and clearly there's a very strong intersection between what we do. Tell us about your emotional overdraft. Do you have one? You
Oh
said
my
knowing the
goodness
answer.
me. Yes, I do. So and actually it's I think I think that it feels more onerous for me because I feel I shouldn't have one because I should be role modeling amazing well-being. And I really do see myself as a work in progress. I read Oliver Burkeman's book in the summer, 4,000 Weeks, and I was so happy that he said that basically, generally, you write about or you study the things that you most need. And I think that that's certainly the case for me. So when it comes to writing books about, having good well-being conversations, the reason I wrote that book was because I'd struggled with it. And when it comes to writing all the research that I did in the summer for a course for ITV around avoiding overwhelm and burnout, I had to take lessons for myself out of that as well, because there are people who are do the same sort of thing as I do and don't actually end up in emotional overdraft, but generally they tend to have another source of income or they've got a somebody that supports them at home, and I'm a single mum, so the income comes down to me. And so yeah, I definitely struggle with it myself. I'm definitely a work in progress. I am getting better. I'm genuinely making some changes which are making me feel better. Um, and a lot of that came out of the work that I did last year for ITV because I felt that I couldn't actually, in you know, all integrity, deliver a course about overwhelm if I wasn't working on my own overwhelm at the same time.
Great. And I think that idea, if people take nothing away from this podcast, take away the idea that we're all a work in progress. That's absolutely the case. I hadn't thought about that before about emotional overdraft, but undoubtedly there's a few examples from me in the book, but there's many other examples I could talk about. And it's definitely something I've struggled with, and it's definitely something I slip into far too easily and pay back far too slowly. So it's a challenge I have. So it's well observed. But remember, everyone listening to this, to be kind to yourself and to remember that you are a work in progress. This is always a journey. And if you have an emotional overdraft, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's something like any overdraft. It's there when you need it, but you dip in and you dip out again. You don't live in it. That's really the point about emotional overdraft, and that's the bit we're all working to do. And the people that don't have an emotional overdraft, and my research says there are very few genuinely. And if they appear to have no emotional overdraft, it's probably because they're borrowing other people's and are oblivious to. It can be that. So
That's
there's a
nice.
certain amount of that going on.
Yeah.
So brilliant that you're a work in progress, and that's what we want to sort of dig around in today, is to understand that. So from your point of view, you said that lovely phrase, work in progress. What is it that you think that you're particularly working on in your emotional overdraft? What's the thing? What's your challenge?
Um, I thought it was great reading your book actually because a lot of it did resonate. I was thinking, oh, I'm doing so much better, and I am doing a lot better. But I think the big one for me is JFDI. I'm a massive, yeah, I'm a massive see it, do it, and I struggle
Sorry, just
to,
for everyone listening,
yes.
JFDI is on advice of the editors. I have to call it just flipping do it. But it's a doer mentality. It's someone who, and in fact, we should even say what an emotional overdraft is for anyone who's new to this. I beg your pardon, Heather, for jumping in, but I
That's
think I need
fine.
to
Do
say this.
crack on.
So
Yeah.
I just went straight into the conversation. But an
Yes.
emotional overdraft is when you're, and in a business context, it's when you're subsidizing the success of your business at your own mental or physical cost, or your own mental or physical well-being, and the measure of your emotional overdraft is the quality of your resilience. So as your resilience is falling, you live in your overdraft, your resilience drops. So it's subsidizing your success of your business at the cost of your own mental or physical well-being. And there are 10 drivers to emotional overdraft that we've identified, one of which is JFDI, and that's right where Heather is. And JFDI is a kind of do it mentality. I just do it. It's a JFDI, just get on with it. So that's where Heather is. Sorry, I just thought I'd
No,
contextualize
no,
that
no, that's
quickly.
fine.
Go for it,
That's
Heather.
fine.
What?
No, I am incredibly impatient. I'm very driven. I'm quite ambitious. and I'm very quick. So I'm quick to pick up stuff and I'm quick to get on with it. And I'm quicker than almost anyone I know. And therefore, it's very difficult for me to go, well, give that to someone else because I could do it in 5 minutes. And I love ticking stuff off my to-do list, whether it's actually the most important thing right now or whether it's something that's just quick and easy. I just love tick, 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 tick. So,
All ticks were created equal, weren't they? All ticks are
oh,
ticks.
yes. Well, actually, again, I think that I am much better at prioritizing my work stuff now. So I'm very good at kind of understanding um, that's the most important job today. But where I probably don't look well enough is more from a holistic fashion. Like, for example, this week I should be sorting out my pension. And yet I know I can't get into the pension provider. It's been a nightmare, and therefore I put it off, put it off, put it off, put it off. But actually, that's probably my most important job this week. Whereas it will always be something on the work list that will always come up the top for me, rather than the home stuff that's the other issue. And actually, I don't think it was in your book, but it may be, and I didn't. Maybe it's expressed differently. But on my work, specifically, I created it around my strengths. So that means that I'm in flow almost all the time when I'm working, because the jobs that I'm not in flow about, I give to someone else. So I have people that do things that I am not brilliant at and don't love doing. And therefore, work feels like play to me. It's the most enjoyable thing that I can do. And I found this distinction over the summer called obsessive passion versus harmonious passion. So for me, work is an obsessive passion because I'm in flow so much of the time. I'm working to my strengths. It feels like play. It's difficult then to switch off. And that's why often your workers who are really good at their work, who find meaning and purpose in their work, who think that the values of the organization absolutely align with their own, are unfortunately you're most likely to burn out because they're also actually really struggling to switch off because it's work has become an obsessive passion for them. And I very much see myself in that place. That's where I have been.
That's fascinating. And I think a lot of people listening will recognize that. And that's where understanding emotional overdraft begins to give you a new perspective on the people you work with, and the people you live with and the society you live in. I think that's what's their behavior, what's happening to them. And I don't talk about that specifically, and it's a lovely idea, because the drivers of the emotional overdraft, whereas I guess this would fit into, there's a lot of different components of that would manifest themselves within the different drivers. So for example, trust, I think might be one of the ones that's in there. But brilliant that you can get into flow, and brilliant you can get to that state. And that's really good. So what's the impact of you being in that flow state on the people around you?
I don't think when I'm in flow there is an impact. I think it's the problem is that because I'm enjoying it so much, I don't switch off. So
So does that
it's
mean
like
you'll end up neglecting some other things?
yeah, exactly. So it's like if you know Aristotle's concept of the golden mean. So the fact that he also was the person who looked at strengths and thought that strengths were actually sort of helping you towards a path of virtue. So if you focus on your strengths, you're more likely to be in flow because you're good at that job and you love it and it sort of just flows and you're not even aware of time passing. But I deliberately focused my all my work around those things at my strengths. But he also has this concept of strengths overplayed. And strengths overplayed are when you are then actually so much in that place all the time that you're neglecting other things. And that I think is where the golden mean comes in, i.e., this idea that actually that you can't if you're in flow in your strengths all the time, you end up with work being an obsessive passion. So for me, what happens is I don't notice that I'm tired because I'm enjoying myself too much. I don't notice that I'm neglecting other things, and then all of a sudden something will come up which will mean that actually my my stress bucket will just overflow. So I had a mini burnout 4 years ago. Uh, And that was that. I was just working, 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 and actually thought I could do absolutely everything and didn't realize that actually you need to choose sometimes what you can and can't do. And because I was good at everything I was doing, I was thinking, well, what's the problem? I can do all of this. It's easy. But actually, I'm now learning that actually you can't do it all. You have to choose some of the time, and it's looking at what's most important to you right now, and saying no to many more things, and knowing that actually you don't have to be, if you're working all the time, that isn't a good thing.
Totally that. And I guess what's happened when you're in that state, you're not noticing your resilience declining because you're
Exactly.
loving the work.
Exactly.
You're not noticing that happening. And I was talking to someone the other day, like we're like electric cars in lots of ways. Well, obviously we're not, but we are. That at some point, no matter what you wish, you've got to plug back in and
Yes,
recharge. And we
absolutely.
are the same. And you probably it sounds like you get to the point where you're so there, you're so going for it, you don't even notice the sort of needle hitting the red, and then bang, you're hit full force. And I guess that also means you choose the things you're good at, which is a brilliant for your emotional overdraft. That's a great thing to do. Do the things you're good at and delegate the heck out of the others. So it sounds to me like trust, which is one of the big drivers, is not such an issue for you. It sounds like you hire good people and you delegate work well, but that allows you to focus on what you need to focus on. So is that sort of
Yes,
resonating?
I think you're absolutely right. I think that's the thing, is like you don't notice because you're so much enjoying what you're doing. You don't notice that you're entering that point at which actually you do need a break, because work isn't play. It feels like play sometimes because I'm so happy with what I'm doing, but you need to change it up. Um, but again, it's this whole balance, isn't it, between the idea that actually do I want to go nice and gently and slowly and steadily towards my grave, or do I want to be, rushing and actually tearing the whatever out of everything that I'm doing? And uh, it's a difficult balance, isn't it? Those people that actually make a real difference in the world often are people who actually are very single-minded about things. They're very single-minded about their work, aren't they?
They are, they are. But I'm just wondering, I don't think either of us are saying that being single-minded is a bad thing. I don't think we're saying that being focused on your business and being driven and having a passion and a mission is a bad thing in itself. What we're saying is be aware of doing what you have to be able to do what you do sustainably. You have to be able to
Yes,
sustain it in
yes,
the sense that if
yes.
you really want to have an impact, you've got to be able to keep going. And the way to do that is not to have the grand passion to the point where you collapse and then recover and then have the grand passion and then collapse again. That can't be the way to do it. So sustainable in the sense of you can do this for year after year after year is really the way to make this have the most
I,
impact, I think.
I couldn't agree more. That's exactly where I'm looking this year, is how do I actually sustainably work, and that's the conversation that most of my friends are having as well, especially when you're my age. And what happens to women my age is, not only are you dealing with the menopause, but you're also probably dealing with difficult adolescent children and elderly dying parents. And the three things come together, and essentially every single one of my friends is really struggling right now because of that. And we're all looking at actually, how do we keep work sustainable? How do we keep our other demands sustainable so that actually we can live a long, fruitful, healthy life? So for me, what you've hit on there is absolutely correct. It's how do we actually maintain that passion and maintain that drive and make a difference in a sustainable fashion.
Absolutely. And I don't explore much. I do touch on it, but I don't explore much the roles, the difference between men and women in terms of dealing with emotional overdraft, because it is different. Societally, it's different. Personal expectation is different. And the way generally the way society is structured is different. And I have no particular interest in owning emotional overdraft. I want people to take the idea and go, I could explore that in the space you've just described, because then it becomes useful to more people. So please, if people are listening, go and explore this in that space. This is not about, I'm not trying to persuade you to buy the book. Sorry, publishers. I'm trying to persuade you to take on the idea of emotional overdraft by talking to people like Heather, who come and saying, this is my experience of emotional overdraft. And I had exactly this conversation with a lady this weekend who runs a business, is very successful, whose father-in-law sadly died very recently. She had to leave the family and come back because she had to do work. She felt guilty for leaving. She feels guilty for leaving the family. She feels guilty for having to make that decision. And that's piling onto her emotional overdraft at a time when she needs the most resilience she can get, which is to deal with supporting her family, supporting her business, continuing to focus and deliver on everything that she's committed to. So it's an astonishing level of pressure. And it just shows that emotional overdraft comes from different directions. It isn't simply just about how we work. It's also how we engage with our families and how we engage with our
No, I mean,
society, even our,
yeah,
community.
I tend to think that when we talk about work-related stress, and obviously I work with organizations, and so we talk a lot about this, what actually within the system, what within the organization creates stress. And I think it's really disingenuous because it is impossible to identify what comes from work on its own and what comes from your personal pressures as well. So, when I had people, large teams working for me when I was working in the corporate world, every single person that actually had a stress related issue, it was a combination of home and work, and or it might have been just home, or but there's one thing at work that tips them over the edge, and then it becomes work related stress all of a sudden. It's always a combination, and so you can't just look at work in isolation.
And if we can pin work-life balance, the phrase work-life balance, to the wall right now and finally get rid of it, I think that would be great. I think this idea of work-life balance, that there's work and then you leave work and then you have life, and you can balance the two things, seems very strange to me. That work is part of your life, and it's you don't leave your personal life at the door when you do work, and you don't pick it up again when you leave work. It just isn't the way we are wired. And so I think it's an unhelpful, I know it's a shorthand, but it's an unhelpful shorthand. You're looking quizzical, Heather. Do you not agree with me?
I'm not sure, because for a while I would say that I very much agreed with you and I preferred the phrase work-life integration. But I also know that unless we actually create some boundaries around our work, and unless and there's research that shows, for example, that if everybody is off at the same time, then we're much more able to relax. So that sense of having a Sunday, for example, that we used to have when we were growing up, where people didn't do anything, they didn't go to the shops, they didn't do anything, they just maybe washed the car, went for a walk. We all were off on a Sunday, therefore there was no pressure. And I really noticed it this year at Christmas. Everyone took the same 2 weeks off pretty much. Therefore, you weren't getting emails in, you weren't feeling bad about not answering them. And actually, when we're all off at the same time, I think it does really, really help. So I think there's a sense of trying to reclaim that term work-life balance into having a more boundaried work life for me.
So work-life boundaries rather than work-life balance.
Maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's
I'm
what
not
it is.
being, I'm not trying to be pedantic. I just
No,
think
no, no, it makes a difference.
it's become used as a very simplistic and slightly unhelpful shorthand, I think, which is, I'm a
Yes.
worker, I've got my life. And that's not a healthy balance to have.
No.
But this is why, great. You don't have to agree with me. I don't have the monopoly on all these things. But it's work-life boundaries is the takeaway I'm going to take from this
expression.
Yeah, well, let's take that away. Well, you said it, so
Yeah.
copyright Heather Beach. So great thought. So can I just touch on the book a bit? So I'm a boss, not a shrink. Is such an interesting idea, because when you start thinking about emotional overdraft for yourself, and then you start understanding that other people obviously exist in their emotional overdraft too, and they're going to be running these things up too, you want to start talking to people about that. You want to explore it, but you're not a shrink. You're not qualified. You've maybe read a book, and then you want to kind of talk about that. How do you go about that kind of conversation at work when you're not, you're a boss, not a shrink?
I mean, this pertains really to the whole conversations about well-being, which might come from work overload. It might come from, something happening at home. It might come from a health issue they've got. It might come from anything. So it's any conversation about well-being with an individual. And I think that we have either tended to try and bury our heads in the sand and not have those conversations because they're really difficult to open. So you worry about being intrusive, you worry about getting it wrong, about making it worse for that individual, or we have been a highly empathetic person, and not just the cognitive empathy, but the kind of affective empathy where, oh my goodness, I feel your pain. And then we end up crossing those boundaries. So what we find is that sort of we've got the spectrum of empathy among the people that we train. So, and some are very much at the side of, look, it's work, this is my business, I don't want to open those conversations. And the others are, oh no, my team and I were like friends, I take on their pain as if it were mine. And I think it's a really, really difficult one. Boundaries are something which is underexplored. Actually, I'm going to write an article about it because I looked yesterday, I couldn't find anything. I was trying to do some research around boundaries for managers, and I couldn't find anything that I thought was relevant. So I thought I'm going to have to write something. And as I'm writing it, I'm thinking, this is so hard. This is so hard because we create friendships at work as well, don't we? We don't just go in as we have people that we download to that become friends to us. And then what happens when we have to have those difficult conversations, and perhaps we're really, really supportive when it comes to a well-being issue, and then we have to manage that person out of the business. Those lines are really, really difficult, I think.
They are. And the other thing, as you were talking, occurred to me was that we also create realities. We have the inference ladder, so we create realities about people, which we then bring into those conversations. So you might take into the conversation, well, this person is difficult to deal with.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
then your entire kind of
Yes.
mean and manner is dictated by how the reality you've created about that person, which might not be the reality for them at all and is unlikely to be their reality. And then that then becomes a challenge. And you mentioned empathy. It's one of the 10 drivers. And people quite often say to me, how can empathy be a potentially bad thing for my emotional overdraft? But you've nailed it. It's absolutely right. You can over empathize. You can put yourself in someone's place too much to the point where you're not actually being helpful or constructive. So it's a lovely, lovely idea. So are there some tips about how you could talk about this? Are there some things you could share with us?
I think that biggest the biggest takeaway for managers is that they're not there to solve that person's problem. They're there effectively in that first conversation, at least. They're there to actually listen non-judgmentally and to understand where those blockers to non-judgmental listening are coming in. So noticing, right, that's my preconception about that person, that they're a victim, right? Let me just notice I'm doing that and bring that back to listening. Or I'm trying to solve their issue, right? Let me come back to listening. Or I'm relating that back to my own experience. Let me come back to listening. If their job in that conversation is to show that person they've been listened to, acknowledged, and understood, that's their first job. Once that's done, and they've said, is that it? Is there anything else? Okay, got it. Then we can move into co-creating a plan with that individual, which might be as simple as, right, we've had a lot of information. I've got a lot of information here. You've got a lot to think about. Let's go away and both think about how we can support you moving forward. Let's meet again tomorrow. They don't have to go in with any answers. They don't have to go in with a solution. And ultimately, they can't solve that person's problem. All they can do is provide support within the boundaries that are reasonably practicable for that organization, for that role, etc. And they don't even have to have the answers there. They don't even have to have those ideas there and then. In fact, might be counterproductive. Maybe take it away and think about it, go back and have another conversation. So that if managers can get their heads around that they're not, that their main job in that conversation is to allow that person to feel heard, understood, acknowledged, that takes away some of the pressure of actually, right, ooh, I'm going to get it wrong. I'm going to say the wrong thing. I'm going to, because actually, if you're just showing you that person's been heard, you can't really say the wrong thing.
If you're listening.
Yes,
You
if
can't
you're
say the wrong
listening,
thing
yes,
because you're
correct.
listening.
Yes, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
that's fantastic. And I think that's we do take those into conversations. We do take the idea that we can't help ourselves. We want to jump in. We want to contribute. We want them to know that we're listening and we're, oh, I've got an example of that as well. And that's not what you're there to do. What you're telling us is you're there to listen and to
Absolutely.
hear it,
Yeah.
genuinely listen and to hear it, and not even have a solution. And as you've said, if you take a solution into that, or what you perceive might be the solution, that's based on very little information you previously had, a low intelligence solution, which you're then looking to shoehorn or maybe fit into what you're hearing. So then what you're hearing starts to become a bit partial because you're looking for evidence to support what you already thought when you walked into the room. You're not listening.
No, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
That's great insight. This is so helpful. And as always on these Exploring Emotional Overdraft conversations, we go to places that aren't really about emotional overdraft. We go to places about how do you deal with other people, and that's because that's what we do, isn't it? We're
Yeah,
we
absolutely.
social
Yeah.
creatures. So is there anything else in the book, do you think, that particularly in relation to, I'm starting to understand what emotional overdraft is. I'm starting to understand my relationship to my own well-being, and that's helping me reflect on what other people and how they might relate to their own well-being. Is there anything else that you think you could share with us?
Yeah, so I mean there were quite a few things that resonated with me, and I think that, so I'm just going to tell you what they are and then I'll tell you what I think's behind them. So over servicing. So I over service
So
every
this is another one of
customer.
the 10 drivers, is
Yes.
over-servicing is another one of the 10
Yeah.
drivers, and it's insidious. Yeah.
So I, you know, over service my customers to within an inch of their lives. So I recently discovered, I mean, we do tailored courses, right? Everything's tailored. So that means that I talk to the organization, I try and understand their culture, I make sure the images are relevant to them, their employee assistance program, their signpostings in there. If we're using actors to do forum theatre to demonstrate a conversation, we build a script for them. We do feedback surveys after every course. We do certificates. We do badges we do all this stuff. And I recently discovered that our competitors, as it were, just sell an off the shelf course with none of this additional stuff for more money than we're charging. So I'm okay. Right. Okay. Interesting. And are they valuing those things that we're providing additionally? I don't know. I don't know. Is it an expectation? Is it an expectation that I've created? I don't know. Um, so that empathy over delivered, we've already discussed that. Those two particularly are, and I think they both come from a similar place actually, and they just flip and do it. I think they all come from a similar place. So I think that one of the, and my key takeaway always is self-awareness is the most important thing. So trying to understand what drives you and then understand where that came from um, is critical for me in trying to address these issues. So I'm running courses about overwhelm at the moment for organizations, and I've got a series of cognitive things that you can do. For example, think about setting your meetings to 50 minutes rather than an hour, or these things which are little tricks, things that you can do, which are cognitive, you can just do. But fundamental to all of that, if you're really going to make these things stick, you need to understand what drove you to be that way in the first place. So I've been had to go on this journey of self-discovery because of having fallen over during, 4 years ago, having a little burnout and then dealing with my parents' deaths and my daughter being diagnosed with OCD and loads of stuff. And I've had to, in order to safeguard my own resilience, I've had to dig a bit deep and find out why am I like I am. And a lot of, for me, is driven by perfectionism, which I think is a modern ill, actually. I find a lot of, when I explain to people what perfectionism actually is, they're like, oh, wow. Yeah, that's me. That's me. Because I had this view before I understood properly that perfectionists were all neat and tidy. They were procrastinators. And actually, it's not that at all. Self-oriented perfectionism is having incredibly high standards for yourself. And it's being really uncomfortable when you make a mistake. other oriented perfectionism is not really thinking much of people if they don't strive to better themselves, and really struggling when people around you make a mistake. So both of those, I'm really high in both of those, and I am gradually dismantling them by understanding my mum was a perfectionist, my dad was a perfectionist. They brought me up to believe, and it's not that they did this on purpose, right? But I believed that in order to be loved, I had to be a good girl. I had to be perfect. And they didn't mean to do that. And perfectionism may have worked in their day and age when actually my mum had a job which was being a housewife, my dad had a job which was 9 to 5. No one has that kind of life anymore. We can't do everything perfectly. So dismantling those beliefs and understanding where they came from has been fundamental to me. And I'm not saying that I'm fixed because it's a constant thing. I notice when it comes up and I'm like, okay, that's what that is. And I've got more of a choice about it now I'm aware of it. But if I hadn't dug into that, and I hadn't felt like I had to dig into that, I would still be dealing with the cognitive tools, which are not going to get you very far ultimately.
Well, as you say, we're all a work in progress, aren't we? And that's what you're admitting there, is that you've dug down deep and found what might be one of the causes of this, one of the fundamental causes, and you're working on it. And that's a great thing. And that's, if you want to talk about emotional overdraft and paying it back and reducing your emotional overdraft, knowing or starting to understand what's behind it, behind your behavior, and recognizing it, even if you're not doing anything about it yet, and you are, starts to reduce your emotional overdraft immediately, because at least you know what it is. And you can go, oh, that's what's happening. I can recognize that in the moment, and then I can do something about it. So even that is, I think, a great thing from an emotional overdraft point of view. When you were talking about JFDIs, your drivers, being over empathetic, over servicing your clients, I can see where that's come from, the perfectionism. But the little voice in my head was going, I wonder, and I do hear this, I wonder if this is a fear of being found out.
I don't think it is actually. I don't think it's about a because I don't suffer from imposter syndrome. I know I'm really good at what I do. And um I think it's more I think it's more about likability, uh feeling that I have to be liked. And that leads me to kind of like over empathize, over service. Um yeah, I think it's more about that.
And do you think you are likable without you having to try so hard?
Yes, yes, I do. I do. And actually, again, it's been a really recent development, this one, but I care a lot less. I really cared about being disliked, and I particularly cared about falling out with people. I really didn't like that one bit. I would dwell and dwell and dwell on it. And particularly friends, for example, where you've been friends for a very long time, and there's that sense of sort of, well, it's a failure if I walk away from this. And yet sometimes people just trigger each other, don't they? And you can't, there's not a lot you can do about it. I mean, I suppose keeping being self-aware helps, but ultimately, I have actually recently sort of parted from quite a few people because it just wasn't really working. And in the past, I would have really struggled with that because everyone had to like me. And if they didn't like me, that was really, really hurt my sense of self. And it doesn't anymore.
And there is an emotional driver right there. That need, that that desire to be liked by other people. I mean, I sort of went out at respect, and I missed it slightly, but it's the desire to be liked, which is very similar, certainly in the same part of the spectrum. And that is such great self-awareness to know that you don't have to do that. You don't have to go hunting for that, because that will drive an emotional overdraft powerfully, really, really badly for you if that's what you go seeking, because it will take your time. I keep looking to my right because I have a little list of, I can't remember where it came from. I wish but it says delete, decline, delegate, downsize, do smarter, and delay. And it's
Nice.
a way of pushing stuff away. Delete, decline, delegate, downsize, do smarter, and delay. I'll put it in the notes,
Oh, please do.
the show
Yes,
notes.
that's
But
really, really
um,
good.
that's been a game changer for me. And almost there's another D on the bottom of that, which I just heard from you, which is decide who your friends are. And I can completely understand that idea. I'm of a older than you, but I've had friends for a very long time, and sometimes you just become different people. And people who you were great friends with at 18 and 28 and 38, maybe you're not still great friends with at 58. You're physically distanced. Your experiences are totally. You're much longer experience not being with them. And yet we feel this need to sort of lock back in and maintain a relationship. And, it used to be Christmas cards when people still sent those, didn't it? You'd send them a Christmas card and think, why am I sending this? Well, okay, and I hope the kids are fine. And I can't quite remember their names. And you send those cards. I love the idea. So could you just tell us a little bit more about how you came to the conclusion that certain friendships were no longer, you shouldn't be pursuing those friendships anymore and investing in those friendships. Are you able to share that?
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember exactly what the trigger was, but I know that I was spending most of the time I was seeing people who were pursuing me, who wanted to see me, and who were very kind of like driving. And when are we going to see each other? When are we going to see each other? And I immediately feel guilt. And then I realized, I think it was the fact that I realized one day that because also we're so mobile these days, so all my friends were in different parts of the country, of the world, and I used to think, well, in order to have a friendship, you need to keep up with those people. You need to see them regularly. And then I think I realized that if I looked at every weekend and I saw one friend a weekend, I'd be out, I'd be out the whole year seeing friends. And I was like, I can't do this. I've got a job. I've got a child. It doesn't really work anymore. So it sounds very calculated, and it was actually. I sit and I looked at who I thought should be in my inner circle. So those people who, and the fundamental of that was those people who actually just accept me exactly the way that I am, that recharge me, and don't deplete me, and yeah, just that's it really, fundamentally. And I suppose having some things that you like to do in common with those people is nice as well. So there are certain things that I really enjoy. And I've got really I think a lot of people since the pandemic have got a lot less out and about, and I've got incredibly picky about what I do now. So I it's not just a question of who I see, it's what we do as well. So I want to do something that I really enjoy doing. So I really enjoy doing with a person I really like seeing, and I do far less of those things. Prior to the pandemic, I was running around doing saying yes all the time, and it just I don't know how I cope, to be honest. It feels like not a good way to live, to be honest, at all. Um, but even before the pandemic, I was identifying those people that weren't good for me. And sometimes I'm not good for other people, and I can see that. And there's been a couple of people that have defriended me because I obviously upset them. And actually, in the past, I would have thought, oh, well, how do I need to alter myself to fit into the way that, because it's me that's at fault. I'm wrong here. I should make everyone feel good about themselves. But sometimes it just doesn't work like that, does it? So, the
And
fact that I
with the energy it
yeah,
takes, sorry, but the energy it
yeah,
takes to morph your shape
yeah,
into something that you think is what other people are looking for so that you fit their expectation of you is unsustainable. We talked about sustainability. You can't
yes,
possibly keep that up for any length of time.
no,
Sorry, I cut
no.
right across you, Heather.
No, 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 you're absolutely fine. I think I've finished. I've
No,
finished.
it's brilliant. And I think this is ever so valuable because it does create. This is why I think emotional overdraft is actually a universal state. I know I've written a business book because the publisher said you need an audience and that's your experience. So I've written it from a business perspective. But I do think it runs up, it adds to your emotional overdraft if you are doing what you just described. You're giving every weekend away when what you'd rather be doing is doing something you love. You're driving around the countryside. You're seeing people who actually rub you up the wrong way these days, or seem. I've got a particular friend. I say friend. I'm going to explore this now, straight after this. But who every time they contact me, they never ask about me. They're never interested in me. They really don't know or care really. All they want to do is tell me about what they're doing and what they're thinking and how they're feeling and what they want from me. And I'm thinking, I've thought for years, this is a very one-way relationship. It's almost parasitic. Why am I still friends with this person? But I keep trying to adapt and conform to their expectation of what our friendship is. I haven't got the capacity for that. I've
No.
got other things I want to be doing and impact I want to have. So it's a lovely, lovely idea, Heather, and I'm going to take it and work with it.
I think that what we probably haven't explored is the systemic nature of this, in that it's no wonder that everybody is in this state, apart from a few people, because it's the way our society is set up now. The things that we don't talk about, like the fact that both men and women work, and in the past they might have had a job which was a lot less onerous than their partner, or they might not have worked at all, so they were doing all the home stuff, and then men were out being the hunter gatherers coming in. We've got a huge number of single parents, of which I'm one. 25% of us are single parents, and then 90% of those are women. So that also creates a big sort of shift. And then we've got technology, which has really, really made massive inroads in the way we work, particularly over the last 10 years since the advent of the smartphone, but really the last 30 years. When I started work, there was a secretary, and then the stuff used to get wheeled down to different offices, and a decision would be made in the fullness of time by committee. And now, see it, do it, pings, you answer it. We're always on, and it's all addictive, and we have to get so much better at unhooking ourselves from that, consciously creating those boundaries and consciously creating contracts with each other in the way that we didn't have to do in the past, because it was just normal. Well, I work 9 to 5. You don't bother me on my holidays. Of course you don't. But now it's expected. Oh, I'm going to be in contact. If you send me an email at 7, I'll answer at 8. We have to actually consciously look at this and actually create those intentional boundaries and those intentional contracts between us in a way that we haven't before. Because yes, running your own business is and always has been a stressful thing, but it's just everyone is in the same boat. I don't speak to a single person that isn't thinking about, and I love your deeds, I'm going to use these, isn't talking about simplifying. That's what most people that I know are talking about at the moment, is how do I simplify my life? You could say delete, decline, downsize, do smarter, delay.
Yeah, so you could. I hadn't thought of it that way before. I totally agree with you, but I'm just thinking about here's my phone. To take that with me on holiday, if I'd wanted to take work with me, that would have been 3 filing cabinets and a whole load of documents, and you couldn't physically have done it. Whereas now it's right there. And not only that, I'm taking my desk, I'm taking my desk phone, I'm taking my inbox and my outbox. Everything is with you permanently. And that relationship we haven't recalibrated at all, it feels. Not yet. Not to any level of where people can do this sustainably and acceptably and not feel guilt about doing it. I think people still feel guilty by going, well, I'm not going to reply. I remember years ago, I got a phone call on a mobile. I was playing cricket. I was going out to bat. And my phone went off and I thought I'd quickly check it. And it was the CEO of my company going, I just need to talk to you about this on a Sunday at 2:30, and I was playing cricket. And, to my immense shame, I took that call and I delayed what I was doing. And it was nonsense, absolute nonsense. So it's ever so hard to manage. We could keep going. There's tons and tons to dig into here, but I think we've got so much out of this. And I always think a good podcast, if you get one thing you want to scribble down and take away, then it's a good one. I think we've had about 7 so far, so absolutely brilliant. But I'm going to squeeze one more out of you.
Oh, go on.
So the idea of emotional overdraft is described as 10 simple changes for balancing business success and well-being, and those 10 simple changes are the 10 drivers. But is there a one simple change that we say simple here, not easy. So one simple change that you think people could do to help reduce their emotional overdrafts? Is there something you could recommend that you do maybe?
So I've only recently done this, right? So, but what I've started to do is understand a lot more about what I want my business to look like and whether that is actually achievable or not. So there's a huge pressure when you run your own business to scale. and I ran businesses for other people inside businesses. So I had this view of myself that I know how to do this, and therefore I'm not going to be another wellbeing trainer. I'm going to run a business, and I'm going to have a business which someone will want to buy from me in 10 years time when I retire. And therefore I'm going to have systems, processes. I'm going to be creating scale right from the beginning. And I've tried that for 7 years. I've employed people, it hasn't worked. I've got people trying to do things that only really I can do, like have conversations with people that want to buy from me. Um, I've finally found a marketer that can write me copy, which is great. But it's yeah, I am not actually now cut out to manage a team in the way that I was when I was part of a large corporate. And what someone said to me earlier this year is they said, you're trying to ride two horses. You're trying to ride a horse, which is running a business, and you're trying to ride a horse, which is doing deep work with clients. Which would you choose? And I said, well, obviously, deep work with clients, because that's what I really enjoy now. I don't want to do the project management thing. I don't want to do it when one works one day of the week, another works another day. They all work different days. They're all freelance. It just doesn't really appeal to me anymore. And so I've now decided that rather than success looking like somebody wanting to buy my business in 10 years' time, success now looks like doing good work with good people and taking home a decent salary. So that's, for me, that's quite a big shift. And what that means is that then I'm looking at everything in the light of that. So understanding what you want to achieve and then actually going, is that sustainable? Can I do that? Do I want to do that? Am I prepared to put the hours in to do that? I don't know. That's my latest thinking.
That's so helpful and so generous of you to share that. It's important that people hear it. The idea that you determine what kind of business, what kind of life you want. If you even, I was going to say define it, but even if you don't define it, even if you just have a sense of what it looks like, that you're driving towards, then you have some direction, then you have some ability to go, then what do I do that helps me towards that? And this thing I'm doing here seems to be taking me off in that direction, so I can course correct. So having a sense of where you want to get to is so valuable. And that is, for a lot of people running successful businesses, that can be a change that they need to make even now. So whether it's you want to build a more valuable business or grow your business or have a lifestyle business that can sustain what you want to do, if maybe I describe it that way, then be deliberate about it, I guess is what I'd say. That's a great tip.
It's so
Thank you
funny,
for
Andy,
sharing it.
because if you told me 5 years ago that I was creating a lifestyle business, I might have come down and given you a slap round the chops, because the idea of a lifestyle business to me was like, "Oh, no, I'm a successful entrepreneur. I'm going to create a business. It's like, I'm better than a lifestyle business." And now, actually, I'm looking at it going, what were you thinking? Actually, you want a life that you can really enjoy, that's sustainable. And actually, that, what's wrong with a lifestyle business? In fact, it's quite a good thing if you can create a lifestyle around something that you really enjoy doing that pays you. That's probably quite successful. So, yeah.
And I hesitated when I said it slightly. I hope that came across, because there
You
isn't a
did.
better term for it.
There isn't. No,
There
you're
isn't a
quite
better
right.
term for
No.
it. But it comes with a load of baggage, which is, you've failed. So, you're little. It fits with me. Lifestyle business fits with SME. When you hear people talking about SME, and say, "Oh, I specialize in SMEs." I want to tell them to F off. I just, you patronizing buggers. What do you mean SME? And by the way, the government means up to 250 employees.
I know they do.
If that's small,
yes.
if that trod on your foot, that would hurt.
Yes.
So,
yes.
it's not, there are phrases that are unhelpful. But I worked with a client and stopped working with the client, sacked myself, because he realized one day that what he wanted was to just do a lot more of the things he loved doing and not spend all of his time stressing out about paying other people's mortgages.
Exactly.
And that's entirely legitimate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But the wider point is to have some sense of what you're trying to achieve and therefore planning towards it. Heather, it's been fantastic talking to you. Where can people find you? Where do they need to go to find out more? Where can they find your book?
Okay, so
my
book's on Amazon.
Stupid question.
Yeah, I'm a boss, not a freak. It's on Amazon. My website is www.healthyworkcompany.com. They can find me on LinkedIn, HD Beach, Beach, and they can always email me on heather@healthy-working.com. But hopefully there'll be some of that information on the bottom of your recording anyway. But thanks so much. I've really, really enjoyed it.
Heather, thank you so much. It's been brilliant.
Thank you. You too. Thanks, Andy.
It's so interesting to have someone who's dealing with emotional overdraft, a work in progress, who is also an expert in the space and who can share so many insights with us. And as I so often say on these podcasts, listen to it. If you thank you for listening. Thank you for being here, but listen to it. And then if you get the time, listen back through, and that's when to make the notes. So first time, just immerse yourself in it. And then second time, go back through and pick out of it, what you need from it. But there's a few things that jumped out at me, lots and lots of good thoughts over and above already. I've repeated it. We're all a work in progress. But I love the idea of the complex interplay between personal pressures and professional pressures. I think that's something that we can skip past in a way, or just fail to notice and understand the relationship between those things. And it's something definitely to explore. And I think that's what Exploring Emotional Overdraft is all about. Is it about exploring, picking it, holding it, looking at it from all sides and trying to understand more about ourselves as individuals and how we manage our emotional overdraft or manage our feelings. So I love that idea of the interplay between personal and professional pressures. I think at one point she said, self-awareness is the most important thing, and particularly in relation to perfectionism, or the need for personal validation or external validation, which obviously resonate for Heather. I thought that was really interesting. The need for external validation, and or a certain degree of perfectionism, which I see a lot in founders. That really being aware of that, and often we talk about being aware of your emotional overdraft is the first step to really sorting these things out. But particularly those two players, I don't tend to think about perfectionism. It's not a word I use in the book, so not much I touch on it. And external validation is the same. So they struck me as something to explore and think about. A really simple idea buried in there, which is you have to choose. You have to choose sometimes. And I like the idea of rather than just being sort of taken along and executing and feeling like our work and our job and our business is controlling us, but sometimes we should choose. We should make choices, stop and make conscious decisions. When I talk to my clients, I call this about being deliberate. So it's a nice little nugget that came up. Gosh, there's so many, and I don't want to just repeat the whole thing and paraphrase what she said, but and one more playing on that, I guess, playing on the idea of being deliberate. But it was the idea of being deliberate about relationships and activities that you invest time in. And that's sort of obvious, I suppose, but we don't always do it, or don't often do it in some cases. So be deliberate about the relationships and the activities you invest your time in, but specifically focusing on those that recharge you and that don't deplete you. So interesting. And I was speaking to someone recently about the idea of flopping in front of the TV is not relaxing. What you need to do is plug into something that energizes you. And I think that feeds into this thought as well. So being deliberate about what when you choose what to do and choose not to do, but also about the activities that you invest and the people that you invest your time in, and being deliberate about that and looking to be recharged or energized. It's just a great idea. So I hope you found that one useful. Again, they're always so different, these conversations. It's very different from some conversations I've had before on Exploring Emotional Overdraft. If you liked it, please like it, comment, follow us, do all the things you meant to do on social media, and spread the word, because we're on a mission here to help people with their emotional overdrafts. So please, but thank you for listening, and thank you for getting this far. May your emotional overdraft always be tiny, and I'll see you next time.